When Paul came to ancient Corinth on his second missionary journey, he came to a city that was certainly known as a commercial and cultural crossroads. You see, down below me here, the sea forms what's called an isthmus, this narrow band of water which was eventually, in modern times, broken through so that ships could avoid going all the way around the Peloponnese. There were two key ports on the water. One of them was Lekthion, and the other one was Kenkrea. And Corinth was really the port city that served both of them. Now that gave Corinth a place of cross-cultural currents. But Corinth was also important from a military standpoint because of this mound. 2,000 feet above sea level, 600 meters, this is called the Acro-Corinth. It dominates the northern point of the Peloponnese, that lower section of Greece, which was a kind of island of its own connected across the isthmus. Over time, Corinth became the obvious choice as a Roman capital for Italia. Now, Rome succeeded several other empires who tried to take Corinth. Corinth was part of the ancient wars between Sparta and Athens, for example. But during the Roman period, there was a general named Mummius who did the unthinkable, and he took the Acropolis. Piece by piece, they broke it down, and this was the ultimate defeat for the city of Corinth down below. And that's background for something that Paul describes in terms of his ministry. Listen to what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 10, beginning in verse 3. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. These are the very verbs used by the Romans in the destruction of cities like Corinth. Demolish, take captive, and punish. You might think that Paul was simply a pacifist, somebody who was preaching a message of love. Paul was a militant figure, every bit as much militant as Joshua was in the Old Testament, but not because he took up physical arms, but because Paul engaged spiritual warfare, which he believed was every bit as significant as the warfare that the Romans had waged. And in fact, in the spirit of Christ, he knew that it was the ultimate war, the cosmic war. Now remember, Paul wrote the letter to the Corinthians from Ephesus, a letter where he also describes spiritual warfare, and he encourages people to put on the full armor of God because we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities and powers. In Paul's ministry, this is what he faced. He faced walls, he faced defenses, he faced boundaries and barriers, and he believed that through the power of the Word and the Spirit only, he could demolish and break down and set people free. And that's how Paul understood the nature of his apostolic ministry.